How does a quiet man respond when his family erases him in front of 200 guests? What happens after he's humiliated at his stepdaughter's wedding, told he's not on the list while the whole room watches? I calmly left, but the next day, they learned what it means to underestimate the one man who kept his promises and could take them away. The morning sun filtered through the bedroom curtains as I adjusted my navy tie for the third time. Today was Alyssa's wedding day, my stepdaughter's big moment. After 15 years of raising her, watching her graduate, paying for her dreams, this felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked toward as her stepfather. "Paul, you're fussing," Linda said from the vanity, applying her lipstick with practiced precision. My wife of 15 years looked stunning in her emerald dress, every inch the mother of the bride. "The wedding doesn't start for another hour." I smoothed down my jacket and checked my inner pocket for the third time. The folded invoice was still there, proof of payment for the Grandview Ballroom venue. $28,000, the single largest expense for this wedding, and one I'd covered without hesitation when Alyssa had tearfully explained that Ethan's family couldn't contribute as much as expected. "I know, I just want everything to be perfect for her," I said, catching Linda's eye in the mirror. She smiled, but something flickered across her expression, too quick for me to read. The drive to Grandview Ballroom took us through the affluent side of town, past manicured lawns and elaborate fountains. This was where Linda had insisted the wedding should be held. "Alyssa deserves the best," she'd said, and I'd agreed. After everything Alyssa had been through with her biological father Richard's absence during her childhood, she deserved a perfect day. Cars lined the circular driveway of the ballroom, luxury sedans, imported SUVs, the kind of vehicles that belonged to Ethan's tech industry crowd. I parked our modest sedan between a Tesla and a BMW, feeling slightly out of place, but proud that I could give Alyssa this moment. The ballroom's entrance was a vision of white roses and crystal. A string quartet played softly, while guests in designer attire mingled near the reception table. I recognized several faces: Ethan's colleagues, some of Linda's friends, a few relatives I hadn't seen in months. "Paul, wait!" Linda's hand caught my arm as we approached the entrance. Her grip was firm, almost urgent. Tanya Brooks, the wedding planner, stood behind an elegant podium with a leather-bound guest list. Her smile was professional but strained as she looked between Linda and me. "I need to check something," Linda said, moving ahead of me toward Tanya. They spoke in hushed tones, Linda gesturing subtly in my direction. A cold knot began forming in my stomach. "Is there a problem?" I asked, stepping closer. Linda turned to face me, her expression carefully controlled. Behind her, I could see guests beginning to notice our small commotion. Conversations quieted, eyes turned our way. "Paul," Linda said, her voice low but carrying in the sudden hush, "you're not on the list." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean I'm not on the list? There must be a mistake." Tanya consulted her book again, running a manicured finger down the pages. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hastings. I don't see your name here." The knot in my stomach tightened into something harder, colder. Around us, more guests had stopped talking. I could feel their stares like heat on my skin. 200 people, all watching this moment unfold. "Linda, this has to be an error. I paid for the venue." I reached for the invoice in my pocket, but Linda's expression stopped me. "The list is correct, Paul." Her voice was steady, final. That's when I saw her. Alyssa stood near the ballroom's main entrance in her stunning white gown, radiant and beautiful. Next to her stood a man I recognized from old photographs, Richard Carter, her biological father. He wore an expensive tuxedo and had his arm around Alyssa's shoulders in a pose that spoke of ownership, of belonging. Alyssa's eyes met mine across the crowd. For a moment, I waited for her to rush over, to explain that this was all a terrible mistake, to tell Tanya to add my name immediately. Instead, she looked away. The understanding crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, planned. The whispers started then, a low murmur of voices that seemed to come from every direction. I caught fragments. That's the stepfather. Didn't he pay for... How embarrassing. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. 15 years of business dealings had taught me to maintain composure under pressure. I straightened my shoulders and looked at Linda one more time. There's no mistake, is there? Linda's silence was answer enough. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of 200 stares pressing down on me. The string quartet continued playing, but the melody seemed distant now, muffled by the rushing sound in my ears. It's okay, I said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. My voice was calm, steady, a small victory in this moment of complete humiliation. I turned and walked back through the crowd, past the luxury cars, past the crystal and roses, past the life I thought I'd helped build. Behind me, the whispers grew louder, but I didn't look back. The drive home passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white against the leather. The invoice crinkled in my pocket every time I shifted, a paper reminder of my foolishness. Back in my home office, I sat in the leather chair I'd bought to celebrate my last business success. The room was quiet, filled with the accumulated trophies of a careful life. Diplomas, awards, family photos that suddenly felt like lies. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd hoped never to need, Marcia Green, family law attorney. She answered on the second ring. Paul, this is unexpected. How did the wedding go? Marcia, I need to see you first thing Monday morning. It's about the trust, the wedding payments, and some promises I need to revoke. There was a pause. I see. How urgent is this? I looked at the invoice on my desk, then at the family photo where Alyssa smiled between Linda and me at her college graduation, a graduation I'd funded. Very urgent. Monday morning found me in my home office before dawn, surrounded by 15 years of financial records spread across every surface. Bank statements, tuition receipts, loan documents, birthday party invoices, the paper trail of a stepfather's devotion laid bare under the desk lamp's harsh light. The first document I'd pulled was from Alyssa's sophomore year at Westfield Academy. The private school had cost $32,000 annually, but Linda had insisted it was necessary. She needs the best opportunities, Linda had said, and I'd agreed, taking out a second mortgage to cover the costs. Next came the college expenses. Stanford University, Alyssa's dream school, 4 years at $60,000 per year, plus living expenses, study abroad programs, and the emergency funds that seemed to arise every semester. The credit card statements told their own story: designer clothes charged to my account, spring break trips to Europe, a BMW for her 21st birthday because all her friends had nice cars. I'd said yes to everything, every request, every tearful phone call, every time Linda had explained that Alyssa just needed a little help getting started in life. My phone buzzed. A text from Gordon Miles, my oldest friend and a retired police detective. Heard about the wedding. Coffee at my place? 20 minutes later, I sat on Gordon's backyard patio, watching steam rise from my mug, while Gordon studied me with the careful attention he'd once reserved for suspects. Tell me what happened, he said. I recounted the scene at the ballroom. Linda's calculated coldness, Tanya's uncomfortable fumbling, the sea of staring faces. When I finished, Gordon was quiet for a long moment. How long has this been building? He asked. That question unlocked a flood of memories I'd been suppressing. The family dinner 6 months ago when Linda had casually mentioned that Richard is back in town and wants to reconnect with Alyssa. The way Alyssa had started referring to her childhood as before Dad came back in social media posts. The gradual shift in family photos, where I appeared less frequently, positioned further from the center. I think it started when she got pregnant, I said, the words tasting bitter. Or rather, when she got pregnant deliberately. Gordon raised an eyebrow. Explain. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot I'd saved from Alyssa's Instagram story, a post she'd deleted within hours. It was a photo from a party, Alyssa laughing with her sorority sisters, with a caption that read, "Step 1 complete. Ethan Wallace is loaded and totally clueless. Baby on the way means wedding bells." She trapped him, I said. Deliberately got pregnant to secure a marriage to a wealthy man. When I tried to talk to Linda about it, she said I was being paranoid and controlling. Gordon studied the screenshot. And now she doesn't need her stepfather's money anymore. Exactly. She has Ethan's family wealth and her biological father's approval. I'm just an embarrassing reminder of the years when she needed financial support. We sat in silence while Gordon processed this. Finally, he spoke. Paul, you're a good man. Maybe too good. But good men can still protect themselves. What do you mean? I mean, you've been documenting everything without realizing it. Every receipt, every payment, every promise you made. It's all evidence. The question is, what are you going to do with it? That afternoon, I drove to the family restaurant where we'd celebrated Alyssa's high school graduation. Romano's Italian kitchen had been our tradition for years. Birthdays, achievements, family milestones. I sat in the same booth where Alyssa had tearfully thanked me for being the father she'd always needed when she'd been accepted to Stanford. The irony wasn't lost on me. That same night, she'd asked me to co-sign her student loans because her credit wasn't established. I'd signed without hesitation, proud to help secure her future. My phone rang. Linda. Paul, where are you? You missed the gift opening at my mother's house. I wasn't invited to that either, was I? A pause. You're being dramatic. The wedding was beautiful. Richard walked her down the aisle perfectly. Richard, who abandoned her for 15 years while I paid for her education, her car, her apartment deposits, her medical bills. That's enough. You chose to do those things. No one forced you. The line went silent. I stared at the phone, feeling something shift inside me. Linda was right. I had chosen to do those things. But I'd also chosen to document everything, to keep meticulous records, to structure my generosity through legal promises and trusts that could be revoked. That evening, I met Lucas at his college apartment. My biological son was home for the weekend, and seeing him felt like stepping into clean air after being underwater. Dad, I'm sorry about what happened, he said immediately. Mom and Alyssa were wrong. Everyone knows it. Lucas was 22, studying engineering, and had always maintained a respectful distance from the family drama. But his loyalty to me had never wavered, even when Linda had tried to paint me as the villain in various family disputes. Your stepmother and stepsister have made their choice, I said. Now I have to make mine. What are you going to do? I looked at my son, steady, honest, nothing like the manipulative people I'd been living with. I'm going to stop being taken advantage of. That night, back in my home office, I opened the file cabinet I'd labeled Family Financial Records. Inside were folders organized by year, each containing every receipt, every contract, every legal document related to my support of Alyssa. The trust fund I'd established for her 25th birthday contained $200,000, money I'd saved by working extra contracts, taking on weekend projects, sacrificing vacations. The trust had specific clauses that I'd insisted upon. The money could be revoked if the beneficiary engaged in fraud, deception, or deliberate harm to the truster. I'd thought those clauses were just legal protection. Now I realized they were my way out. I pulled out my laptop and began typing an email to Marcia Green, attaching scanned copies of every relevant document. The wedding venue invoice, the trust paperwork, the loan co-signatures, the receipts for 15 years of financial support, everything that proved how thoroughly I'd been used. At 2 a.m., I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it the evidence of my stepfamily's betrayal and the foundation for my response. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Hastings, this is Ethan Wallace. Could we meet for coffee tomorrow? There are some things about Alyssa I think you should know." I stared at the message, feeling the first stirring of something that might have been hope. Maybe I wasn't the only one who'd been deceived. The next morning, I met Ethan at Cornerstone Cafe, a quiet place downtown where the tech crowd often held informal meetings. He looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance rumpled and strained. When he saw me, relief flickered across his face. "Mr. Hastings, Paul, thank you for meeting me. Call me Paul, and thank you for reaching out." Ethan ordered black coffee with shaking hands. "I found something yesterday. After the wedding, when we were going through gifts and cards, I found Alyssa's old journal. She'd left it in one of the moving boxes." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph of a handwritten page. The writing was unmistakably Alyssa's, the same looping script I'd seen on thank you notes for birthday gifts and graduation cards. "Read the entry from March 15th, Ethan said quietly. I read, "Operation Baby Trap is working perfectly. Ethan is so sweet and naive. He actually thinks I love him. The pregnancy test came back positive right on schedule. His family is worth millions, and he's the only heir. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Paul's money got me this far, but Ethan's money will set me up for life. I just have to play the loving wife for a few years, maybe have another kid, and then I can divorce him and take half of everything. He's so trusting, he'll never see it coming." My stomach turned as I read the words. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I had suspicions, but there's more." He swiped to another photo. "This one's from last week, right before the wedding. The wedding is finally here. Richard agreed to walk me down the aisle, which is perfect. Having my real dad there makes everything look more legitimate. Paul has been useful, but now he's just embarrassing. Linda agrees that having him at the wedding would look weird, like I couldn't afford a real father. The guest list is better without him. After all, what has he really done except write checks? Richard is the one with the impressive career and the right connections. Paul is just the wallet that got me to this point." I set the phone down carefully. She planned this. All of it. The pregnancy, the wedding, excluding you, everything. Ethan's voice was hollow. "I thought she loved me. I thought we were building something real. What are you going to do?" "I don't know. We're married now. She's pregnant with my child." He looked up at me with desperate eyes. "What would you do?" I thought about the trust fund, about the revocation clauses, about 15 years of careful documentation. I'd protect myself, legally, financially, emotionally, and I'd make sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. After Ethan left, I drove to Linda's mother's house, where the post-wedding brunch was being held. I wasn't invited, but I wanted to see the performance for myself. Through the window, I watched Linda playing the role of proud mother, accepting congratulations from relatives and friends. Alyssa glowed in her going-away dress, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach while she accepted gifts and well wishes. Richard stood near the fireplace, regaling a small crowd with stories about his daughter's childhood, stories that were either fabricated or borrowed from my own experiences raising her. The guests hung on every word, charmed by this devoted father who had clearly played such an important role in shaping the beautiful bride. I pulled out my phone and took a few photos through the window. Not for revenge, for documentation. Evidence of how easily my 15 years could be erased, how completely I could be written out of the story. That afternoon, I received a call from Linda. "Paul, where are you? People are asking about you." "I'm sure they are. What are you telling them?" "I'm telling them you had a work emergency. It's easier than explaining why you couldn't handle a simple family celebration with maturity." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "Linda, I paid for that venue. I funded that wedding. I raised that girl. And we're grateful, but that doesn't give you the right to make everything about you. Alyssa wanted her real father to walk her down the aisle. You need to respect that. Her real father who abandoned her for 15 years while you chose to step in. No one asked you to. You're not her biological father, Paul. You're not her real family. Yesterday just made that official. The line went silent. I stared at the phone, feeling the last vestiges of guilt evaporate. Linda had made her position clear. I was not family. I was a convenient source of funding who had outlived his usefulness. That evening I called Marcia Green. Paul, I've reviewed all the documents you sent. This is quite a comprehensive record. What are my options? Legally, you have several. The trust fund can be revoked based on the fraud and deception clauses. The wedding venue payment can be disputed as obtained under false pretenses. The co-signed loans can be restructured to remove your liability. And practically, you can walk away from all of it. Every promise, every financial commitment, every legal obligation. You have grounds to revoke everything. I thought about Ethan's devastated face, about Linda's cold dismissal, about Alyssa's calculated manipulation. Do it. All of it. Paul, are you sure? This will be comprehensive and very public. I'm sure. They wanted to erase me from their lives. I'm going to show them what that actually means. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in decades, I wasn't worried about someone else's financial emergency, someone else's dreams, someone else's opinion of my generosity. I made coffee and sat in my office, looking at the family photos I'd soon be taking down. In every picture, I could see the pattern now. Alyssa's calculating smile, Linda's performative affection, my own naive contentment. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Dad, are you okay? Mom is posting weird stuff on Facebook about family loyalty and gratitude. I texted back, I'm better than okay. I'll explain everything soon. Another text, this one from Gordon. Heard through the grapevine that you're making some moves. Good for you. And then, surprisingly, a message from Ethan. Paul, I've been thinking about what you said, about protecting myself. Could we meet again? I think I need your advice. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of being valued for more than my checkbook. Ethan wanted my guidance, my wisdom, my support as a person, not just my money. For 15 years, I'd been the man who solved problems with his wallet. Now I was about to become the man who created problems for people who had taken that wallet for granted. The transformation felt overdue. Monday morning at Marcia Green's law office felt like stepping into a war room. The conference table was covered with neat stacks of documents, 15 years of financial records organized into categories that painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation. Paul, this is remarkable, Marcia said, adjusting her reading glasses. I've never seen such comprehensive documentation of financial abuse within a family structure. She held up the first stack. Wedding expenses, venue rental, catering deposits, floral arrangements, photography, totaling $67,000, all paid by you. The contracts clearly show you as the primary financial guarantor. The second stack was thicker. Educational expenses, private school tuition, college costs, graduate school applications, study abroad programs, emergency loans, $238,000 over 15 years. The third stack made my stomach clench. Personal support, car payments, insurance, apartment deposits, medical bills, credit card debt, family vacations where you covered all expenses for Alyssa and Linda, another $89,000. Jesus, I whispered. I never added it all up. The total financial investment in Alyssa's life and future comes to $394,000. That's not including the trust fund, which brings the total to just under $600,000. Marcia opened another folder. Now here's what makes this legally actionable. The trust fund contains explicit clauses about fraud and deception. The wedding payments were made under the assumption that you would be included as family. The educational co-signatures were based on verbal agreements about ongoing family relationships. She pulled out a thick document. I've drafted a comprehensive revocation notice. It withdraws all future financial commitments, demands immediate repayment of recoverable funds, and dissolves the trust effective immediately. What about the wedding venue? Can we get that money back? The venue contract has a family dispute clause. Since you were the primary payor but were excluded from the event, we can argue breach of implied contract. The venue company will likely refund the payment to avoid legal complications. I signed document after document, each signature feeling like a small act of liberation. When we finished, Marcia leaned back in her chair. Paul, I have to ask, are you prepared for the fallout? This isn't just financial revenge. This is going to destroy relationships permanently. They destroyed the relationship first. I'm just making it official. That afternoon, I met with Harold Morrison at First National Bank, where I'd maintained accounts for 20 years. Harold had handled my business loans, my mortgage, and the trust fund setup. Paul, I have to say, this is unusual. Revoking a trust fund isn't something we see often. How quickly can it be done? With the proper documentation, which you've provided, we can freeze the account immediately and begin the revocation process. The beneficiary will be notified by certified mail within 48 hours. Harold pulled up the account on his computer. The current balance is $207,000. Where would you like these funds transferred? Into my personal savings account. And Harold? I want a complete record of every transaction, every deposit, every interest payment. I want documentation that proves this money came from my earnings, my sacrifices, my work. Of course. Paul, if you don't mind me asking, what happened? I told him about the wedding, about the guest list, about 15 years of financial support that had been erased in a single moment of public humiliation. Harold listened with the careful attention of a man who'd seen family money disputes destroy relationships before. I'm sorry, Paul. You've always been one of our most reliable clients. It's clear you put a lot of thought and care into that trust fund. I did. I thought I was securing her future. Turns out I was just funding my own replacement. That evening, I drove to Ethan's office building. Wallace Tech Solutions occupied 2 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, and Ethan's office had a view of the city skyline that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Paul, thanks for coming, Ethan said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I've been thinking about what you said, about protecting myself. Have you talked to Alyssa about what you found? I tried. She denied everything, said the journal was just creative writing, that she was working on a novel about a gold digger and those were character notes. Ethan laughed bitterly. She's good. If I hadn't seen the dates and the specific details about my family's finances, I might have believed her. What details? She wrote about my father's real estate investments, my trust fund structure, even my grandmother's will, information I'd shared with her in private moments when I thought we were building a life together. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of the brunch. Look at this. See how she's positioned herself with Richard? How Linda is telling everyone that Richard raised her? They're rewriting history in real time. Ethan studied the photos. She's doing the same thing to me, isn't she? Creating a narrative where she's the victim and I'm the villain if I question anything. Exactly. And the pregnancy gives her leverage. She knows you won't abandon your child. What would you do, Paul? In my position? I thought carefully before answering. I'd document everything. I'd protect my assets legally. I'd make sure any future children were protected from manipulation. And I'd prepare for the possibility that the woman I married doesn't exist. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. She asked me yesterday if we could buy a house in my name only, for tax purposes, said her credit was still being established. Don't do it. Any major purchases should be joint or protected by prenuptial agreements. And Ethan, get a DNA test when the baby is born. His face went pale. You think she might have? I think she's capable of anything. The journal proves that. When I got home, Linda's car was in the driveway. She was waiting in the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. "Paul, what the hell are you doing?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Ethan called Alyssa today. He's asking weird questions about her past, about her finances, about the baby. He's acting suspicious and paranoid. Maybe he's just being careful." "Careful about what? She's his wife. She's carrying his child." Linda slammed her hand on the counter. "If you're poisoning him against her, I swear—" "I'm not poisoning anyone. I'm just sharing information." "What information?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the journal photos. Linda's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, understanding, and finally, defensive anger. "You had no right to share private family information with him." "Private family information? Linda, this isn't family information. This is evidence of fraud." Alyssa was just venting in her journal. Everyone writes dramatic things when they're emotional. She wrote about deliberately getting pregnant to trap a wealthy man. She wrote about planning to divorce him and take his money. She wrote about using me as a wallet until she found something better. Linda crossed her arms. And what if she did? She's a smart girl who knows how to secure her future. There's nothing wrong with marrying someone who can provide for you. The casual admission took my breath away. You knew. You knew she was manipulating him. And you helped her. I helped my daughter find a good husband, just like you helped her get the education and opportunities that made her attractive to someone like Ethan. I helped her because I loved her, because I thought I was her father. You were useful, Paul, very useful. But Alyssa needed more than just money. She needed connections, status, a real future. Ethan can give her that. I stared at my wife of 15 years, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. And what about me? What do I get after 15 years of being useful? You get the satisfaction of knowing you did the right thing. Isn't that enough? No, I said quietly. It's not. Linda's expression hardened. Well, it's going to have to be. Because this is how things are now. Alyssa is married to a wonderful man. They're starting a family and Richard is back in her life. You need to accept your place in this new dynamic. What place is that? The place of someone who helped when he was needed and now needs to step back gracefully. I nodded slowly. You're right. I do need to accept my place, and I do need to step back. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable. I'm being very reasonable. In fact, I've already started stepping back. Marcia Green is handling the details. Linda's face went white. What details? All of them. That night I slept better than I had in months. The next morning brought a certified letter that would change everything. I watched from my home office window as the postal truck pulled up to Linda's mother's house, where Alyssa and Ethan were staying while they looked for their own place. The letter contained the official trust fund revocation notice, the wedding payment dispute filing, and a comprehensive list of all financial obligations I was withdrawing. Marcia had included a cover letter explaining that all decisions were final and legally binding. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. Paul, what have you done? Linda's voice was shrill with panic. I've stepped back gracefully, just like you suggested. The trust fund, you can't just take that money back. Actually, I can. The trust contained specific clauses about fraud and deception. Alyssa's journal entries constitute clear evidence of both. That journal was private. That journal was evidence. And Ethan had every right to share it with me when he discovered his wife had deliberately trapped him. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, how much are you taking? Everything. The trust fund, the wedding payments, the co-signed loan responsibilities, all of it. Paul, please. Alyssa is pregnant. She needs security. She has security. She has a wealthy husband, a biological father with connections, and a mother who supports her choices. She doesn't need me. You're destroying her future. I'm withdrawing my contributions to her future. There's a difference. Linda hung up. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with texts from relatives, family friends, and people I barely knew. Word was spreading fast through our social circle. Paul, Heard about some family drama? Hope everything works out. Linda's sister. Dude, what's happening? Alyssa is posting cryptic stuff about betrayal. My nephew. Paul, if you need to talk, I'm here. Gordon. The most interesting message came from Harold at the bank. Paul, thought you should know. Alyssa came in this morning asking about emergency loans using her wedding gifts as collateral. We declined based on the fraud investigation you initiated. So it was starting. The financial reality was setting in. That afternoon, I met Gordon at Murphy's Pub, a quiet place where we could talk without interruption. Gordon studied my face carefully as I recounted the morning's events. How do you feel? He asked. Relieved. For the first time in years, I'm not worried about someone else's crisis or someone else's needs. And guilty? I considered the question. I thought I would be. But no. They made their choice when they erased me from that wedding. I'm just making mine. Gordon nodded. You know there's no going back from this. Good. Going back would mean accepting that 15 years of love and sacrifice meant nothing. I'm not willing to do that. What's next? There's going to be a family meeting. Linda's already organizing it. I can see the group text notifications on my phone. They're going to try to pressure me to reverse everything. Will you go? Oh, I'll go. But not to negotiate. I want to see their faces when they realize this isn't a tantrum or a negotiating tactic. This is permanent. That evening, Lucas called from college. Dad, I'm getting weird messages from Mom and Alyssa. Something about you stealing money from a pregnant woman. Lucas, let me explain what really happened. I told him everything. The wedding exclusion, the journal entries, the years of financial manipulation, the trust fund revocation. Lucas listened without interrupting. Dad, I'm proud of you. You are? I've watched them treat you like an ATM for years. Remember when Alyssa borrowed money for her sorority formal and then posted pictures of herself in a $3,000 dress? Or when she had that emergency car repair that turned out to be a full detailing, an upgrade package? I'd forgotten about those incidents, but Lucas was right. The pattern went back years. I was wondering when you'd finally stand up for yourself, Lucas continued. You're the hardest working, most generous man I know. You deserved better than this. Thank you, son. That means everything to me. Dad, when this is all over, maybe we could take that fishing trip we've been talking about. Just us. I'd love that. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking at the family photos I'd finally taken down. In their place, I'd put up pictures of Lucas and me, camping trips, baseball games, graduation ceremonies, real memories with someone who valued me as a person, not just a source of funding. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Richard Carter. We need to talk. I stared at the message, feeling a surge of satisfaction. So the biological father wanted to step up now that the money was gone. Perfect timing. I texted back, "We have nothing to discuss." His response came immediately. "You're destroying my daughter's life." Your daughter? Where were you for the 15 years when I was raising her? When I was paying for her education, her health care, her future? You show up for one wedding and suddenly she's your daughter? I made mistakes, but that doesn't give you the right to take revenge on a pregnant woman. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. If you want to support your daughter, you're welcome to do so. But I'm done. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is waiting so long. I blocked his number and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow would bring the family meeting, the confrontations, the desperate attempts to guilt me into reversing my decision. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, I was free. The house felt different without the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on me. I could make decisions based on what I wanted, what I needed, what made sense for my life. I opened my laptop and began researching vacation destinations. Maybe Lucas and I could take that fishing trip to Alaska he'd been talking about, or perhaps a European tour. something I'd always wanted to do but had never been able to afford because every spare dollar went to Alyssa's latest crisis. The possibilities felt endless. The family meeting was scheduled for Sunday brunch at Grandview Ballroom, the same venue where I'd been humiliated just 1 week earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Linda had chosen the location deliberately, probably hoping the setting would remind me of family harmony and guilt me into reversing my decisions. I arrived precisely on time, wearing my best suit and carrying a leather briefcase that contained copies of every document, every receipt, and every piece of evidence that supported my actions. The parking lot was full. Linda had clearly invited everyone, relatives, family friends, even some of Ethan's family members. Tanya Brooks, the wedding planner, greeted me at the entrance with obvious discomfort. "Mr. Hastings, welcome. The family is gathered in the main dining room." "Thank you, Tanya. I trust there won't be any issues with the guest list today?" She flushed red. "No, sir. No issues." The dining room hummed with conversation that fell silent the moment I walked in. 43 people, I counted them, all turning to stare at the man who had taken money from an expecting woman. The whispers followed me as I walked to the front of the room where Linda, Alyssa, Richard, and Ethan sat at a table that looked like a tribunal. Alyssa looked pale and strained, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Linda's face was set in lines of righteous anger. Richard wore an expensive suit and an expression of paternal concern that might have been convincing if I hadn't known he'd been absent for 15 years. Ethan looked miserable. "Paul," Linda said, standing as I approached, "thank you for coming. We need to discuss this situation like adults." "I'm listening." "You've made some very serious accusations against Alyssa, and you've taken actions that are hurting an innocent unborn child. We're hoping you'll reconsider and restore the trust fund." I set my briefcase on an empty chair and looked around the room. Every eye was on me, waiting for my response. Some faces showed sympathy, others confusion. A few displayed obvious judgment. "Before we discuss anything," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room, "I think everyone should understand exactly what happened and why." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. 15 years ago, I married Linda and became Alyssa's stepfather. From that day forward, I treated her as my own daughter. I supported her financially, emotionally, and practically. I held up the first document. Private school tuition, $32,000 per year for 4 years. Total, $128,000. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some people looked surprised at the amount. College expenses at Stanford University, $60,000 per year for 4 years, plus living expenses, study abroad programs, and emergency funds. Total, $238,000. The murmurs grew louder. I could see relatives doing mental math, realizing the scope of my financial investment. Personal support over 15 years, car payments, insurance, medical bills, credit card debt, apartment deposits, family vacations, total $89,000. "Paul, please," Linda started. "I'm not finished." I held up another document. Wedding expenses, venue rental, catering, flowers, photography, total $67,000, all paid by me for a wedding where I was deliberately excluded from the guest list. The room erupted in whispers. Several people looked shocked, turning to Linda for explanation. "And finally," I continued, "a trust fund established for Alyssa's 25th birthday. $200,000 of my personal savings intended to secure her future." I paused, letting the numbers sink in. The total financial investment in Alyssa's life comes to just under $600,000. Richard stood up. "Paul, no one disputes that you've been generous." "Sit down, Richard. You don't get to speak about generosity. Where were you when Alyssa needed surgery at age 12? When she was applying to colleges? When she was struggling with student loans? You were absent for 15 years while I did the work of being her father." Richard's face flushed, but he sat down. I pulled out my phone and held it up. 1 week ago, at her wedding, the wedding I paid for, I was told I wasn't on the guest list. I was humiliated in front of 200 people and told by my wife that I wasn't Alyssa's real family. I looked directly at Alyssa. But that humiliation wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering that my stepdaughter had deliberately gotten pregnant to trap her wealthy husband, and that she viewed our 15-year relationship as nothing more than a financial convenience. I showed the room Ethan's phone with the journal photos. These are excerpts from Alyssa's personal journal, where she describes her Operation Baby Trap and refers to me as just the wallet that got me to this point. The room exploded. Voices rose in shock, anger, and disbelief. I could hear fragments of conversation. She wrote that? Oh my God. That's horrible. Paul, stop this! Linda shouted over the noise. I'm almost done. I pulled out the final document. This is the trust fund revocation notice filed legally and permanently. Every dollar I invested in Alyssa's future has been withdrawn. Every financial promise I made has been revoked. Every legal obligation I accepted has been dissolved. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I was told I wasn't family, so I'm no longer acting like family. Alyssa has her biological father, her wealthy husband, and her mother's support. She doesn't need the man she described as an embarrassing reminder of when she needed financial help. Alyssa finally spoke, her voice shaking. Paul, I never meant... Those journal entries were just... I was confused and emotional. You were calculating and manipulative. There's a difference. I turned to address the room. I want everyone here to understand. This isn't about money. This is about respect. For 15 years, I gave everything I had to a family that saw me as a resource to be exploited and then discarded. I'm done being taken advantage of. I closed my briefcase and picked it up. The legal documents have been filed. The financial obligations have been dissolved. The trust fund has been revoked. These decisions are final. Paul, wait. Ethan stood up, his face pale. I need to tell everyone something. He pulled out his phone and showed the journal photos to the people nearest him. Alyssa deliberately got pregnant to trap me into marriage. She wrote about planning to divorce me and take half my family's money. Everything Paul is saying is true. The room erupted again. Several people stood up, voices raised in shock and anger. I could see Linda trying to control the narrative, but it was too late. The truth was out. Ethan, please, Alyssa said, tears streaming down her face. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. You love my bank account, Ethan replied quietly. Paul warned me, and I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence is overwhelming. I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before me. Behind me I could hear Linda shouting, Alyssa crying, Richard trying to restore order. The careful facade they'd built was crumbling in real time. At the doorway, I turned back one last time. For 15 years, I kept my promises to this family. When you decided I wasn't worth keeping your promises to me, you gave me permission to stop keeping mine to you. I walked out into the bright Sunday morning, leaving behind the chaos, the manipulation, and the people who had mistaken my kindness for weakness. My phone was already buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them all. I had a fishing trip to plan with my son, a life to rebuild, and a future that finally belonged to me. The warm sun on my face felt like freedom.